Hi, I'm Kim Filia, a licensed professional counselor for Colorado Family Guidance. And today I want to come to you and talk about something that's very heartfelt and that we've seen a huge impact over this last year. And that's kind of the implications of what COVID-19 has placed on all of us. So we're going to look at a global, kind of a national view, what's going on, the numbers, statewide, some impact of what's going on, locally what's going on, how we're feeling it, what we're seeing, and then even personal statement and what's behind this. And what we can do as parents to help our kids and help ourselves through this. So let's look at kind of the national average of what's going on related to the pandemic, and then just how many Americans are affected by the coronavirus, and just to kind of bring about the thought of normalcy in it. So if you think about it, about 50% of Americans are struggling with the coronavirus. The Kaiser Family Poll says 45% of Americans are having a mental health crisis. The Colorado survey says 67% of Americans are struggling with it. And then there's a huge study with the Pandemic Risk and Resiliency Model, which is saying 30 to 50% acquire medical, physical, and psychological effects from coronavirus. So from the global, the national view, if we kind of condense it down and like what's going on in Colorado, we see that the Colorado Crisis Line had an average of 18,000 calls a month. So that's how common it is with all of this. In October of last year, it had over 21,000 calls. COVID-19 has not only affected our physical health, but our mental health as well. The director of the Department of Human Services has noted the effects of ongoing isolation and disruption in our daily lives. So much so that the state of Colorado has put forth House Bill 21-1258 to provide free services to youth. Not only am I a licensed professional counselor, I also was a school counselor. And during that time as a school counselor, out of 200 and some kids, only one came to me upset over potentially catching the virus itself, yet numerous kids came to me upset over not being able to see one relative, like going and visiting dad, or the simple thing of going to Thanksgiving and visiting grandparents. This isolation, this being away from family members, is reflected in another big study as well. And this is the European Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Study. Let's bring this closer to home. In Colorado Family Guidance since January, we've seen about 450 clients. Most of the clients that we've seen have had an increase in anxiety symptoms. This is becoming more common in people, so much so that we've had to turn away about 50% of the clients who have contacted us. So as a licensed professional, we can see anybody within the state. You can use telemental health services to accommodate somebody's needs. So basically when I turn on that I'm available through telemental health, we will get so many clients that I have to turn it off within an hour. So we look at all these numbers and we go, what is going on? And if I was a worldwide evil genius and I was like, what am I going to do that's going to cause disruption in the entire world? What would I do? Isolate everybody. Why would that be the biggest thing that an evil genius would come up with? And I want to have you guys hear a young lady's story and let her explain how it impacted her.
My name is Erica Willette, and I was a junior at Custer County High School when COVID hit. We had heard some rumors that we weren't going to be going back to school after spring break because of the new virus that was going around, and we didn't think too much of it at first. And then As we had started doing some online learning, we kept delaying and delaying until we would finally be able to go back to school. I am a hands-on learner, so doing online was very hard for me to do. I really struggled with that. My little brother struggled with that, and a lot of my friends did as well. I got diagnosed with severe anxiety, and I didn't really understand it at first. I would wake up in the middle of the night, not able to breathe. I felt really alone. I overthink super little things that I shouldn't overthink. But my parents, they tried making things as normal as they could for us. They brought us out, we did things, we went hiking, we were just outside more, and it was really nice that they tried to make life as normal as they could for us. But unfortunately, not as many other kids can have that kind of support from their families. They depend on going to school for a social life, to be with friends. They depend on going to school to get out of their abusive households, or even just to get a meal that their parents can't afford for them. My best friend, they really struggled with being at home and being isolated. They were verbally abused by their parents. They felt worthless. They didn't want to do their school. They almost failed school. They had hurt themselves, and she had almost killed herself. It was very hard being away from her because her family wouldn't let her come out of her house. I was able to drive by and wave at her, but I wasn't there to actually hug her and comfort her and be there for her like I should have been. And it was very hard for me to do, and I'm a very happy person, but her being down had really brought me down. And I then witnessed that with my little brother, who was also really struggling, and he would just get into these funks, and we all do. I would get into them, and we just felt worthless sometimes. We felt like there was nowhere for us to go or nothing for us to do. And being isolated and being quarantined was not the way for us to go. I noticed it, like I said, not only with myself or with my family members, but with some of my close friends. I even noticed it with other adults even.
All right, I've been a neuroscientist for the past 15 years, and based on what I've learned, I'd like to make a pretty bold claim. Okay, now, this isn't a late-night infomercial, and there's nothing for you to buy, but I'm going to give you the secret by the end of my talk to being smarter, happier, and more productive. Now, this secret depends on a couple of superpowers that we all have and one kryptonite that kind of gets in the way. Okay, but let's start with Irv and Gloria. Okay, for more than half a century, they lived the American dream. Okay, they were high school sweethearts, and when Irv volunteered to be a World War II naval pilot, Gloria went off to training camp with him. And when they returned, he built his own house and a thriving business where they worked together for years while raising their family. But at the age of 67, Irv died of prostate cancer. And Gloria was never the same after Irv died. She became fixated on her past with him, and yet her memory was slipping away more and more each day. And her personality changed too. She used to be charming and witty, and now she became inattentive, even mean. Family and friends tried to understand her dramatic transformation, doctors too, but they were never able to identify a physical cause. For Gloria, the cause of these changes was clear. She was dying from the pain of a broken heart. And I know this because she told me every chance she got. See, Gloria was my grandmother. So, was my grandmother right? Well, at the very least, it should lead us to wonder about the painful experiences we've all had in our own lives. If I asked you to think about your most painful memories, You'd probably list the death of a loved one before a broken leg. But when you hear my grandmother's story, you're probably thinking that her pain is metaphorical. So a broken leg, that causes real pain, but social pain, the pain that comes from loss or rejection, maybe not so much. About a decade ago, Naomi Eisenberger and I set out to test whether social pain is more than just a metaphor. We asked people to come in and lay in MRI scanners where they believed that they were playing this simple ball-tossing game with two other people also laying in scanners. And if you were in our study, you'd control this little hand at the bottom of the screen, and whenever the ball came to you, you would decide who to throw it to next. Pretty boring stuff. But then, something interesting happens. The other two people stop throwing you the ball. Forever. You never get the ball again. When we looked at the brains of these individuals who had just been rejected, we saw two fascinating things. First, the same brain regions that register the distress of physical pain were also more active when people were left out of the game compared to when they had been included. And second, the more someone told us they felt bad about being left out of the game, the stronger the response was in these regions. Now, if this doesn't persuade you that social pain is real pain, consider the following. Tylenol makes these effects go away. The same painkiller that you take for your headache can help with your heartache too. Okay, so social pain is real pain.
Just like Erica was mentioning and Dr. Lieberman was mentioning, the need to be social, the need to be connected is the foundational piece of us, of all of us. In 27 years of working child and family, that point of disconnect seems to be the most harm. Like I had, to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about, I had one little girl say, the blue guys came and put silver bracelets on my mom. And so that was the point of disconnect in her mind. Another one said, I went to the hospital for 2 days and then I never got to see my mom again. It's not going to the hospital, it's not the reason behind the blue guys, the police coming, it's the point of disconnect that they are feeling the most emotional pain from. To flip that, I had this one little girl in gymnastics. We do a lot of activities here working with children, and she was being a stinker to the other kids. And I tried to use all these behavior modification strategies, and she was still being a stinker. And so I told my youngest daughter, hey Kylie, I'm gonna try something tonight. Let's see, so just go with it. So we must have said team. So this unified name, number, like family, like we're all in this together. We must have said team like 20, 30, 40 times in a 1 hour session. Stuff like, team kids, pick up the mat. Team kids, help me set this up. Team kids, you know, your other friend is sick. You know, if you pray, pray for your friend. And the next time we came, the janitor said, hey, I let in one of your kids. And it was raining. I was like, okay, thanks. And they said, well, they're also pulling out your equipment. And I'm like, my equipment's pretty heavy. Okay. I go in there, it was that little girl that we were having so many problems with other children with her. She was in there. She came early on purpose. She's trying to set up my equipment. And I did not have another social problem with this child. From that fact, if she felt supported and unified and she was on a team. So Dr. Perry does childtrauma.org, so you can look him up. He is a very well-known researcher. He's been around a long time. I want to give you guys this quote. What works best is anything that increases the quality and number of relationships in a child's life. And he further adds, we learned in therapy, because he's a mental health therapist as well, that some of the most therapeutic experiences do not take place in therapy, but in natural occurring healthy relationships. When we think about kids being together, we wonder kind of what's going on and or them not having each other as support. When we look at child development, we literally have to have them together. They learn everything through playing. If you think about it, they say, he's my best friend. I want to spend 4 nights at his house. We like this. So they are getting their identity. We like this through playing. They're getting their social interaction. They're getting conflict resolution through playing. They're getting even like distress tolerance. Like, they won't do this. Well, how are we gonna solve it? It's all through playing. So they need to be together and play. So if it happens like 1 week we are isolated, that's okay. What happens when it's over a period of time, like a year or 2 years? What happens to their development? When we think about playing with each other, it's even a way a therapist can help a child resolve a traumatic incident or several different incidents. Again, I had this one little girl who the school asked me to please allow this child and to help with this child. She was stabbing other kids with pencils. She was throwing books at teachers. In the school office daily, and the school said, can you help? We don't know what to do. So she came into the gym, the activity session, and she was a stinker, like they were saying. I mean, she was being rude to the other kids and pushing the other kids. And so I did not note that because I've learned this by now. I played with her. So like on the bars one day, she was pushing other kids around, so I went and personally played on the bars and then just put her back where she was. What I allowed her to do is to feel safe. Once she felt safe in this environment, then she could relax and take down her defenses and become part of a unit. So basically she went to school, she came to us, and then she didn't go home till like 7:30 at night. Through this time, she relaxed and she became almost like a little gym mascot. And we had a social night, so that's kind of an open gym night. And so when other new kids would come in, this little girl would run up to him and say, let me tell you all Miss Kim's rules. And she'd play with them, and it would go very well. So if we look at this from a parent's perspective, what can we do to help our children? Another great researcher is Dr. Siegel. You can look up one program that he helped develop, which is called the Mind Up program. And I teach this in school counseling. We look at our emotional mind, and there's 2 main parts that we look at, our amygdala, alarm. So we hear something and we get startled. And then we look at how do we recognize what's going on? Should we stay startled or can we calm down? So that's our hippocampus, hippopotamuses go to school. So it might be like, oh, what's that noise? And then it's like, oh, that's okay. It's just daddy's voice. As parents, we want to help them acknowledge their feeling of what's going on and then take it to their prefrontal lobe. So we want to be able to add in the reasoning and help them negotiate through that because their prefrontal lobe isn't really developed yet. A great resource is called The Whole Brain Child, so you can grab that book if you'd like to. So what we're doing is, even with our husbands and our friends and all, is helping validate by acknowledging their feelings first, and then take it into the situation that's come up. So like if they said, they won't play with me during recess, you might try to figure out what their feeling was, which is you feel left out, you feel isolated, you feel upset that your friend's not playing with you. And then we acknowledge that they're not playing with them. How can they solve that? And that will help bring them through that whole process and help them develop their brain. So parents have asked me, how can I help my child through this pandemic? The last 3 main points that I'd like to give to you is not only for your children, it can be for your husband, it can be for your aunt and uncle, for anyone. One is acknowledge the feeling first that we just went over. Like, how are they feeling? How are they doing? I'm actually really concerned about you. The second one is, what did you do before the pandemic continued to do? So here's what I mean. As a parent, I would want to know who my children's friends were, what their house was like. I might go over there on the first visit. So how do we do that? Through like a social platform. Go ahead and talk to the child that they're talking to, parents online. Like, I have quite a few teens that got into chat rooms during this time and they don't really know who they're talking to, so kind of monitor that. And then another researcher put out early on, one of the biggest things that helps decrease the anxiety symptoms is keep it normal. Whatever you did, like if you got up at 6 o'clock, get up at 6 o'clock. If you were in these groups in school, ask the teacher if you can still be put into these groups in school, like you still have the same partners with them. Just try to keep your day as normal. If normally you had research and you talked to these friends, maybe call them up, maybe do an activity together and share it. Just try to keep it normal.